Pay transparency is a big topic in today's job market, and I can certainly tell from the comments that people leave on my channel. But do you really want to know what the salary ranges are? Stick around and we're going to talk about it in this video. Hey everybody, it's Brian from A Life After Layoff, and today I want to talk to you about pay transparency in the job seeking process. Pay transparency is a big thing in today's job market, especially as we move into this great resignation period where we've got a lot of people moving to different roles, and companies are forced to compete with more and more competitive compensation packages, and rightfully so, because pay transparency is a big issue that leads to pay inequality in a lot of cases. And some companies do have a pay philosophy where they lag the market, and other companies are pay leaders. And we as the job seeker inevitably want to target the best quality employers who are willing to pay us the most for our services. And of course, we don't want to accept a new position, find out that we left money on the table, and are always wondering if that person down the proverbial hall from us is making more than we are doing the same job at the same level of skill. Now, in the world of remote work, it gets to be a lot more tricky because pay ranges can vary from region to region and market to market, but the skill sets remain the same. And companies do struggle to figure out how to pay people correctly, especially when we're in a remote first workforce. Because if you do accept an offer at a lower rate than what the market is paying, it's going to lead to a turnover. I posted a video recently about a recruiter who made an unfortunate post on social media talking about how she offered somebody well under market range because the person didn't know their worth. And I think that's a point that we're going to asterisk and come back to later. Pay transparency not only helps the job seeker avoid those low quality employers paying below market wages, but it also helps the employer. Because if we go to the interviewing process and we get a bunch of people involved in trying to hire somebody, and we get to the point of offer and the person's expectations are well above the wage range that we're willing to pay, it's a waste of everybody's time. And that's why recruiters tend to ask the question very early in the process of what's your salary expectations? And it's really to avoid that situation, because companies don't want to waste your time just as much as they don't want to waste their own time going through a process where they can't get a deal done at the end. So pay transparency does resolve a lot of that, but it does open up a can of worms in another way, and I wanted to dive into it in this video. But before we get too far into it, if you're interested in more videos just like this one directly from a corporate recruiter and a career coach, make sure you hit that subscribe button. For the record, I do support pay transparency as an overall policy on positions that I'm able to post salary ranges. I do try to do that, and if I reach out to candidates, I do try to include the salary band as well, because I only think it's fair. However, I want to point out some things that inevitably come up as a result of that. Now, this is from a recruiter's and career coach's perspective. So let's take a look at some of the dark clouds that might surround pay transparency. The first question that I'll ask you in regards to pay transparency is, are you mature enough to handle the feedback that you might get in an interviewing process? So let's take a look at how companies determine wage ranges. In most companies, there are salary bands and salary ranges for different types of jobs. Depending on the level of job, it is going to move you into different buckets. And the wage ranges kind of move up and down based on that. Companies tend to work off of the 25th, the 50th, and the 75th percentile. The 25th percentile means that it's 25% of the actual range. So if a range is $1 to $100,000, the 25th percentile would be the $25,000 mark. Just like the median or the midpoint would be $50,000, and then the 75th percentile would be $75,000. Typically within those bands, companies want to try to keep people at the below 75th percentile so that there's still movement in that band. In other words, you work for an entire year, you want to get a raise at the end of that year, but if you're at the 99th percentile, your raise may only get you up that 1% to get to the 100th percentile. In most cases, a good employee is not going to stick around too long if they never get a raise, because if they're at the top end of the range, they have two choices. They either have to continue just butting along the top end of that range, or they have to get promoted and move into an entirely different range altogether. And when a company gets to the point of making an offer, they're going to look at internal equity. In other words, how many people in that current job type are at different points in that salary band. So if you've got somebody that's an expert level, is the highest skilled person on the team, and they're at the 75th percentile, somebody coming in from the outside who maybe only has skill for the 25th percentile really wouldn't be put above the person who's making at the 75th percentile, because it throws out internal equity. So companies try to balance out things like what's happening on the broader job market. So wages are all moving up, then the companies try to respond. The way things have been going with inflation, companies are struggling to keep up with that with salaries. They'll also look at what your salary expectation is and then what level of skill you bring to the table. And that's why they go through these arduous interview processes. In some cases, they may go through technical assessments to get a really good baseline for what your skill set is. And they may go through other exercises is to determine your value to the organization. And that's where the maturity comes in. If a company has a pay range that's stated as $50,000 to $100,000, and I ask you what your salary expectation is, and you're somebody that's entry level or near entry level, and you say, I'm going to need to be at the 99th percentile, essentially what you're saying is that the skill that you bring into that organization is better than everybody else in that salary band who's currently working there or on the external market that we're considering. So it's likely that if you get an offer at $75,000, which is right at the median of that salary range, you're going to likely feel that you got underpaid and you're going to be disgruntled walking in the door. But in reality, you're maybe not underpaid compared to the rest of the group. So if you're given the feedback that that's what the company has assessed you at, as the employee, you have three options that you can take. First one is you can agree with their assessment and accept the offer as is. The second option is that you can try to negotiate to where you feel you fit, but you better have a good value case for why you think you belong in the higher end of the range. The third thing is if it's just way below your expectations, you can simply walk away from the opportunity altogether. But the maturity comes into being able to realistically self-assess your skill set, your knowledge, your skills, and the abilities that you bring to the table and how they relate to the other people that are on the open market with similar types of skill sets. Now, it is worth stating that there's a danger to staying in the same role for too long because the open market will inevitably pass you by, because wage growth is probably faster on the outside than it is internally to a company. I made another video about this exact topic. I will leave it in the channel trailer once you get to the end of this video if you're interested in checking that one out. The second issue comes is that if you see a stated range and you decide not to apply for it, then you may be missing out on potential opportunities, because it's very common that I will interview a candidate and my hiring manager will tell me, we have the ability to upscale this position to an entirely different range if we find the person with the right skill sets. So if you're just making a decision on the type of job that you want to apply to based on the stated range in a particular role, then you may be passing up potential opportunities to have a much more enriched opportunity. Now, it is the exception rather than the rule, but it happens frequently enough that I think it's worth mentioning in this video. So that is one of the dangers of publishing those salary ranges. The next danger to publishing the salary range is that if you come in and have successfully negotiated yourself to the 99th percentile and you're higher than everybody else in that range, you're going to be expected to contribute higher than everybody else in that role. So there is some danger to being paid too much in a role, as ironic as that might sound. And not to mention when things get tight, and they certainly will again, the market swings like a pendulum. And if those of you who are in the job market for long enough, you'll remember that as early as 2020, nobody was hiring, everybody had laid off, and it was really hard to get a job. And now we've swung, as I record this video, we've swung into a very aggressive labor market where companies can't hire people and people have kind of their pick of their litter. But eventually that pendulum is going to swing back and they're going to find equilibrium or go back the other direction. And we have to be prepared for that. And when companies look to cut costs, who do you think they're going to look at first? If you're at the top end of your range and you don't have the skill set, the abilities, and the results to back up where you are in that band, you're probably going to be looked at first. So if you successfully manage to negotiate a huge salary, congratulations to you. Just know that it comes with a lot of added expectations. And the next thing I'm going to bring up is that there are some laws being passed about pay transparency in a few states and cities. And let's talk about how it affects those labor markets, specifically with remote positions. Colorado, Connecticut, and New York City are some of the ones that come to mind that have passed pay transparency laws. Essentially, it states that an employer who advertises a role anywhere in the country that says remote has to post the wage range. So even if it's a remote position and I'm based in Florida and I post a job that says I can sit remote, technically I'm supposed to be putting in that wage range because of the Colorado, the Connecticut, and New York City, and I'm sure other states will follow. I'm supposed to put it in there. And if I don't put it in there, I'm out of compliance technically in those states. Now, I don't think a lot of employers know this because I see a ton of postings that go remote that don't have the wage ranges posted. But a lot of the astute employers who know these laws, they do circumvent them by stating this position is remote except for those who sit in Colorado, Connecticut, or New York City. So essentially, it's forcing employers who don't want to share wage ranges to avoid posting those jobs with the eligibility for one of those states that might be protected by those pay transparency laws. So it means less job opportunities, in particular those remote opportunities for people who sit there. So how do we handle the pay transparency issue? Well, if you live in a state that has pay transparency, you have a much better understanding of what the companies in those local areas are paying for those types of roles. But if you're somebody that doesn't live in those markets and doesn't know what the wage ranges are in your local area, that's where it behooves you to start to try to figure that out. Go off and look at pay ranges for companies that do self-report. Go look at Glassdoor, especially for the alpha employers in your area. Smaller companies don't self-report quite as much, but if you look at some of the big companies, you will probably see much more accurate data. You can also go and look at one of those markets that does have pay transparency laws and see what they're paying for your type of job, and then adjust it accordingly for the cost of living where you currently live. But there's a lot of ways that you can start to figure out what your value is on the open market. And then you have to do a realistic self-assessment of your skills. Do you have the most current and cutting edge skills? Are you truly effective in your job? Do you have the right industry knowledge? And that's where people honestly struggle. They come in thinking that they have better skills than they really do, and it becomes a disappointment to them when they actually get to the point of offer. So the best thing that you can do as a job seeker is build up your current skill sets to be the best in class in the market and know what your value is. Then you can command those 99th percentile offers and feel comfortable and confident about it. But if you're somebody that's not receiving any phone calls or offers, that's actually something that I specialize in. I've got a website called lifeafterlayoff.com. It is loaded with tips and tricks, all from an insider's perspective. I also have some of my deepest and most intimate knowledge in the form of some training courses. First one is called Resume Rocketfuel. It's going to teach you exactly how to write a resume that's going to give you the best chance of getting noticed for that first round interview. And once you get that first round interview, it's up to you to sell yourself throughout the rest of the interviewing process. And that's where the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp comes in. It's going to take you through each step of that interviewing process, teach you tips and tricks on how to ace it, and ultimately to land that dream offer. Hopefully this video has shed some light on pay transparency, the pros and the cons, and you'll be better equipped because of it. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.